With Evan, Canty, and Michelle coming to you live from above the Heineken River Deck at Pier 17. So, amidst all of the first domino talk, because that's what I'm now referring to Matthew Stafford as. That's the first domino for everything this NFL offseason, right? We also have what is likely going to be a first ballot Hall of Fame defensive player, a former number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, that is also at the center of conversation, right? We have a number 1 overall pick on offense in Matthew Stafford and a number 1 overall pick on defense in Myles Garrett that are really going to set the tone for a lot of what's happening this offseason in the NFL, as we've seen out of the combine the last couple of days. So Andrew Berry, general manager of the Browns, was at the podium yesterday and talking to reporters, including our very own Kimberly A. Martin, and gave this update as to what's going on with Myles Garrett.
So Myles, as you guys have all heard me say, he's a huge part of our organization, really good person. He's an awesome player. Understand the trade request and everything, but our stance really has not changed. We can't imagine a situation where not having Myles as a part of the organization is best for the Browns.
How did you feel when he expressed no confidence in you producing a winner?
Yeah, Tony, I think if you by that you mean the trade requests, I think trade requests, they happen across the league all the time. And I think, at times for individual players that they'll have certain interests during different parts of their career, where they're a young player, a veteran player, things like that. That's not unusual. It's not the first for us. It probably won't be the last. It's not the first across the league. But we appreciate Myles. And, like I said, we're not interested in moving him.
So he's discussing they're doubling and tripling down against trading him. And yet yesterday on our show, Jeremy Fowler, the aforementioned, we played some of the clip there, talked about the idea that he believes the Commanders will try to get in on it and that maybe the Eagles will look at it and say, well, no, we're not going to let them get to the Commanders. We're going to up the offer. Guys, I don't understand this. The Browns are going nowhere fast. They don't have a quarterback, and maybe possibly they could have a bidding war for Myles Garrett, as they should have. Is this all positioning? Is this a negotiation point here?
No, it doesn't sound like it's positioning. What it sounds like is Andrew Berry and the brass for the Cleveland Browns are going to take the offseason and the moves that they make as a part of trying to convince Myles Garrett that he should stay in Cleveland. But what should scare Andrew Berry is that the motivating factor for Myles Garrett wanting out of Cleveland isn't money. It's not about money. He's going to get paid whether he stays in Cleveland or he goes somewhere else. The fact that what should scare Andrew Berry is that Myles Garrett doesn't think he can win in Cleveland, right? Mm-hmm. The GM from Cleveland said it himself. Players have different reasons why they have trade requests depending on where they're at in their career. Well, Myles Garrett trade request isn't predicated on money. It's predicated on winning. And what the best player for the Cleveland Browns right now, and one of the greatest players in the history of that franchise, is telling the general manager and the head coach and ownership is, I don't think we can win here. Regardless of what you think you're going to pull off this offseason, I don't think you can win here. And it's a scary place when the best player on the team wants out because he doesn't think that they can be competitive, at least at the point of the season that actually matters.
You know what else is a scary place to be, though? A place where your customers are angry. A place where your customers don't want to spend their hard-earned money to support you because the face of your franchise that they're in love with, and that is a generational player, is gone. Even if moving on from him is better for you from a long-term football standpoint, think about everything that these Cleveland Browns fans have endured, even recently, let alone historically. With the Deshaun Watson trade, all the hope that they had that he was going to come in and be the missing piece, the quarterback to help this team get to the promised land. And then it was anything but. It was quite the opposite, in fact. It was a disaster from a talent standpoint, from an off-the-field standpoint, from a future standpoint. There's not one thing you can look at in the Deshaun Watson trade that was a positive. And that took its toll on your customer. And now, as another part of that, you can put losing Myles Garrett on that tab. I don't know. It's hard enough to deal a player of that caliber because it's hard to find them. And Myles Garrett is everything that the Cleveland Browns could have hoped that he could be. And think about how the fans will respond if you move on from him. Not saying that a front office should dictate their moves solely based on the desires of the fans. I want to make that very clear. But I also think that this is an organization that has a very passionate fan base that has taken some slings and arrows recently, and that they're probably wondering about how this impacts their bottom dollar and their customer. And let's be real. They're thinking, okay, if we can make some of these moves and we can build towards the future, Myles Garrett is a huge part of the reason why we would be able to slingshot ourselves back into contention if we're smart about this moving forward. Now, I don't think they're capable of doing that, at least in the short term. But maybe they have a different perspective and they think that he's going to be critical in that mission.
Let's talk about the harsh reality of all of this. And we have to just be honest about this, okay? Myles Garrett is going to be a Hall of Fame football player. Number 1 overall pick as a non-quarterback, living up to it is a really hard thing to do. Myles Garrett has lived up to being the number 1 overall pick in the draft. The Cleveland fan in general, especially the Browns fans, I would argue are the best fans in the NFL. There's no franchise that has had to stay with a team when they left, when they were bad, when they were winless, when they had incompetency, all of that, more so than the Browns. But he doesn't play quarterback. And when we say, well, Myles Garrett wants to leave because he wants to win more elsewhere, because he hasn't won that much in Cleveland, meaning if you have the best defensive end in the entire league, it doesn't guarantee winning. Quarterback guarantees winning. No quarterback is going to voluntarily go there unless that Myles Garrett is there. Myles Garrett is not going to stay there unless he's guaranteed a quarterback. If you want to guarantee him a quarterback, you then have to draft one. So Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders has to be ready day one. Impossible. Utterly impossible. You cannot assume because Jayden Daniels did it that someone else is going to do it. And so this is, I believe, a blessing for the Cleveland Browns that they are, for whatever reason, not willing to take advantage of. NFL teams on defense, CC knows this way better than I do, or anyone does, build either back to the front or front to the back. His Giants teams had dominant defensive linemen. So if you have A-level defensive linemen, which he was one of them, you can afford C+, B- level cornerbacks because it's going to be easier for them to play corner. If you want to build from the other way, the Cleveland Browns have the opportunity to do that. If Abdul Carter goes number 1 overall to the Titans and Travis Hunter is sitting there and you want to pair him in your defensive backfield potentially with Denzel Ward if he's there, and healthy and ready to go, well, it makes the defensive line's job a lot easier because the quarterback's going to have nobody to throw the ball to. There are methods to get this thing done by trading him. Create that bidding war between Washington and Philadelphia. Take advantage of the fact that a defensive end does not guarantee you victories, and your quarterback is not coming next year. Take advantage of this because I believe, CC, what we're about to see is a disciplined Myles Garrett because he's never not been disciplined. If he's telling you in the classy way that he asked out, if there is such a thing as a classy way of asking out, but the classy way that he asked out, I believe he's going to be willing to not play football until they move him. I don't believe he's going to be willing to play another game again for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I don't think that Myles Garrett came to this decision lightly based on what we know of the man's character. I don't find him to be impetuous. So this is something where he's been very deliberate. And I'm assuming because of that, he's going to be resolute in his stance. So when he says he wants out, he means it. And he recognizes that he's got to take advantage of the heart of his prime while he's at the height of his powers, having an opportunity to compete for a championship. Myles Garrett has been in Cleveland 8 years. 7-0 seasons. This guy's got 6 All-Pros. This guy's got a Defensive Player of the Year. Yet he's only played in 3 playoff games.